I know I can't save the world, but if I could inspire a child to make a right choice in life, or for somebody to let them know that they care. You always have that one teacher that you will remember. I wanted to be that person in their lives.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hart Inspired, the show dedicated to highlighting individuals in their pursuit of authentic leadership. We peel back the layers to uncover the roadblocks we all face, explore the actions we can take, and how to persevere towards the best version of ourselves. It is my hope that you'll be inspired by their story and gain some insights to help you in your own journey. Elizabeth Martinez is a proud educator specializing in early childhood development. But how does one go from serving her community for 13 years as a police detective in the city of Newark, New Jersey, and 12 years as a detective in the Essex County Prosecutors office in Newark, to writing a children's book specifically for children that are learning more than one language? Elizabeth shares that she speaks 3 languages, which are all connected: English, Spanish, and what many like myself have spoken, Spanglish. Although this series is about women in leadership, we may get a little snippet of some crime stories. Please welcome my guest, Elizabeth Martinez. Thank you so much for being a guest today. I can't wait to hear more about your story, how you went from police work to being an author. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about how did you get into law enforcement in the first place?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Michelle.
Of course.
I became a police officer. I was pretty much young. I was 23 years old. Being a police officer is something that I always wanted to do all my life as a little girl. So I was pursuing my dreams at 23 years old. And not only that, I was a police officer in one of the busiest cities in the state of New Jersey. So it's a great experience and a great story.
Did you have mentors, or was there law enforcement in your family that created that bug for you?
Yes, I had an uncle who was a Newark police officer. He inspired me. Him and his wife were a Newark police officer. And I used to hear the stories, and it was so amazing that this is something that I wanted to do. And I said, oh, I can't wait to one day experience this. But I was very young. But how it became about that I applied to become a police officer was my dad had a friend who was a deputy chief in the Newark Police Department. His name was John Dooley, and he was the one that actually inspired me and encouraged me into becoming a police officer, especially me being a woman. He believed in women empowerment. He believed in women in law enforcement, and he actually was the one that gave me that opportunity. He brought me the application to my house, and he goes, hey, Liz, I want you to apply because I know you could do this, and I know this is something that you always wanted.
Wow, that's really incredible. Where do you start when you're in a police officer? And then how long was it before you became correct?
Yes. Well, I started out in the East District of the city of Newark, which is considered the Ironbound. At that time, in the early 90s, we worked around the clock, which means that you were working from 8 to 4, 4 days, 2 days off, then 4 to 12 the next day, 2 days off, then 12 to, 12 to 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
So we didn't get a lot of breaks. And it was challenging because I had a small baby. I was newly married. I had a little boy at the time. How to say it was hard. It was hard.
Yeah, I bet. When you were in that space, so you're doing what you dreamed of doing, you are a wife and a new mother, juggling it all. That's got to be a lot. What was probably the hardest thing?
The hardest thing is knowing that I was sacrificing my family for something that I loved. And I think many women in America do it. If you want to be a strong, successful woman, you have to compromise. But yet, honestly, I felt no matter how hard the job was, I always kept my family time. I did not let my job interfere with my family. And that's something that as a police officer, many officers don't know how to turn it off. I knew that once my shift was done, I had to step out of that uniform, and I'm a full-time mom now, a full-time wife, a full-time daughter, because I also took care of my parents, who were, my dad was ill, and I took care of him too,
Wow, you had a lot
maintaining.
on your plate.
I had a lot on my plate.
Yeah. Being in that position, tell me a little bit about what that's like being in what most perceive as a male-dominated industry or career path. Did you struggle with that as well, or did they embrace you?
I think it's a little bit of both. You
Mm,
are going to experience some type of bias. Is it
yeah.
unconscious bias? Maybe. Is it
Mm.
just bias because you're a woman and maybe because you're Latina? Maybe. But when you're that young, you don't feel it. You don't think about it. You don't think about those things. It might be happening right in front of your eyes, but you don't see it.
I could definitely relate to that because I think of, when you're young, and maybe it's also generational because I think when I was younger, I certainly didn't see biases that way. I thought, what's wrong with me? When I would feel some of that negativity, not that somebody had these negative thoughts because of how they were either raised or how they perceive things. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that that started to creep in. Was that the same for you?
Absolutely. It was the same for me. It wasn't until I got older then I started realizing and I started analyzing. And you learn once you're on the job, you learn what's real and what's not real. And that made me realize, hey, maybe I've been exposed to gender
Mm,
discrimination. I've been exposed to maybe race, woman. You don't know. As you grow on the job, you realize what you've been exposed to. As a strong woman that I am, I can't let that mentality affect me. So I'm moving forward.
and it shows you went up the ranks for sure. What was after detective? What was the highest ranking that you had?
Well, I was a detective. I did 13 years with the Newark Police Department. But what happens in law enforcement is there's regimes. For example, if you're part of this regime, once the new regime comes, you're booted out for no reason, just because you were a part of that who you work with, you know?
Mm,
So I was a detective for 9 years. After 9 years, I get booted back in the streets. Now I have another son, another baby. And I needed to do what's best for me. So
mm.
I applied to the prosecutor's office. And thank you, Jesus, I got hired by a female prosecutor. And I ended my career in the prosecutor's office. I finished my career with 12 years in the prosecutor's office. Mostly of my career, I worked in the prosecutor's office. I did domestic violence, where I worked with children and mothers and women.
Mm.
And I think, God works in mysterious ways. And I happy to say that I helped a lot of people in that position. Yeah, that was pretty much my career. It was 13 years in the Newark PD, and I worked from vice. I worked alcohol beverage control. I worked patrol. I worked in the director's office. I worked missing persons. I worked
Oh
domestic violence.
gosh.
I worked Sarah, which is also sexual assault. So I had a lot of street time and a lot of experience.
I would assume that you had a lot of adrenaline in certain cases or certain situations that you were engaged in. How do you turn that off, that adrenaline? And the news is just riddled with stories. Did you watch much of that when you came home? Did you kind of completely turn it off? How did you navigate that?
What's ironic about being a police officer is that when all these things are happening, you don't feel it. I feel it now because I feel human now. When you're a
Oh,
police officer, you're like, you get dehumanized for some reason. It's like you walk into a scene of a homicide. You know that person is deceased, but your mind is too busy trying to secure the crime scene. You don't have time to think about what happened. You're trying to just secure that crime scene so this case could get solved. And it's not real. It's not real. When you see an accident, it's so fast when you pull up in a scene, it's actually surreal. Your mind doesn't think is real. Now I have a son who's in law enforcement, and when he tells me about a crime, he told me about he went to a fatal accident, I started crying because
Oh
now
my
I could
gosh.
cry. You know why? Because now I could think about what it is to be human. And I felt that's somebody's child.
Yeah.
Now I could think rational. I could think that's somebody's child. That young guy is not coming home tonight. You
Yeah.
know, when you're working, you don't think that. You're
Wow.
thinking so fast, your adrenaline is going. You don't think about that job. I remember I worked in a very, very busy city. You're getting ready for the next crime.
For those listeners who are not from this area of New Jersey, Newark, yes, is where the big airport is, but Newark also has some really tough neighborhoods, would you say?
Yes.
This is not an area that is all high end, and it has great areas as well, great restaurants, but there's definitely some tough neighborhoods within Newark. So
Yes.
yeah, I just wanted to paint the picture for the audience who may be listening and not familiar with Newark.
But Newark is getting better, thank God.
When you're in law enforcement, I would assume that being in those neighborhoods, it's even tougher. If I'm in a small little village with 2 square miles and not a lot of crime is happening in this neighborhood versus a inner city like Newark. So kudos to you to be as brave as you are, to have a career of how many years now total that you had there?
25 years.
25 years. So that's pretty incredible. You retire from the prosecutor's office. What was going through your mind as to what was next for you?
When I retired, I said to myself, you know what? I don't have another 25 years left. I'm going to live my dreams. And one of my dreams was to become a flight attendant. I became a flight attendant. But once I was in flight school, it wasn't for me. It just was like, you know what? Maybe, I'm a little older now. I don't think I can do this, this is not for me, but at least I tried. It didn't matter. Then after COVID hit, I said, I need to pursue something that I love. What else do I love? I was busy finding myself, which is amazing because now you could think and my career was amazing, but there was more to me. There's more to me, that was Elizabeth the cop. That's what I did. It's not who I am. Now it's time for Elizabeth the person. Who am I? So I went back to school. I got my preschool teacher certification and I got my substitute teacher certification and I started teaching ESL children. And when they say that saying, you found your tribe, I found my tribe because I found children that were just like me. They were struggling speaking English and Spanish. I grew up speaking Spanglish. That was a big part of my life that nobody knew about.
Tell the audience what Spanglish is, because I experienced that quite a bit in my days of growing up. But
Spanglish is when you grow up in Latino environment that your parents speak Spanish, they speak Spanish to you. Spanish might be your primary language, the language that you learned first, and then after you learn English. So now you don't know how to pick or choose one or the other, so you intermix words. You are speaking English with Spanish, and it's okay. It's okay in especially in my culture, for many of us, growing in an urban city, to be Spanglish is normal.
I love that. It's 3 languages, all intertwined: English, Spanish, and Spanglish. My grandparents, especially my grandmother, she would start a sentence in English and then she would end it in Spanish. And it was always, "Tú sabes." I'm like, yes, we understand, but
Yes. When I started teaching ESL, I find these kids that were just like me. They struggled just like me. They had even the same accent I have, because you can never get rid of the accent, when you Spanish, because, I couldn't pick one or the other. I had to be both. I found children that were just like me and they inspire me so much. And just coming from the background that I came from, I knew that I just wanted to help children with life choices, just because I've seen so many children lost, and so many crime against children in my career, that when I found myself in this environment. I know I can't save the world, but if I could inspire a child to make a right choice in life, or for somebody to let them know that they care, I think that you always have that one teacher that you will remember
Yeah.
because something they said, and I wanted to be that person in their lives.
You're doing this work, and I understand you wrote a book. Tell us about how that all came about.
I wrote this early childhood education book. It's called My First Spanglish Book. The reason why I chose early childhood is because I didn't learn English till I was 4 years old. So to me, preschool is very important because that's where you get your social skills. That's where you get
Yeah.
your basics, your basic everything from. And that child who was just like me, I didn't speak English. I didn't speak English till after preschool. So I wanted that child to have the opportunity and have this book that they could learn English and Spanish. And you could intertwine them if you want to and become Spanglish, because there's nothing wrong with being Spanglish. I believe in authenticity. And as long as you're authentic, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if you speak with an accent. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks. I believe that you have to believe in yourself, and it doesn't matter. Be authentic. It's so what you speak with an accent is all good.
Yeah.
People will understand you. I believe more in communication. And that's what I did it. And not only for Latino children, for somebody else, somebody who could be French and wants to learn English and Spanish. That little 4-year-old could pick up that book and now learn English and Spanish at an early age. It was so illustrated beautifully. It's very multicultural because I believe in culture. Culture is very important to me. I think that everyone should learn about culture. So cultural diversity is so beautiful and it's so important in life. And not many people, I guess, have that. Well, I wanted to incorporate that in my book, which I have children of all race in the illustration. I even have children with special needs in the book.
Oh, that's wonderful. You're an ESL preschool. You're doing amazing things. You have this incredible career behind you. What was the moment you decided, you know what, I need to write this book?
The minute I started engaging with these children, and I found that they were children just like me, and I would have loved to have just a little simple tool like that when I was that age. And it's not even for preschool. Older women and men have read the little book and they're like, hey, listen, I just learned how to count to 10 in English. Even my aunt, she doesn't speak English. She was like, oh my God, it was just so fun for me. I learned things in English that I didn't even know.
Is the book in audio as well? Because I would think that audio, you can hear kind of like the Rosetta Stone things, you hear it and you can mimic the sound. Or is it just in print?
It's in print.
Would you consider that? What's the next path for you?
I am going to continue writing books. My next book is going to be more elementary, more for a little older child. And it's going to be just a book about believing in self. As a child, you go through these trials. It's going to be about a little boy who goes through these trials and he's going to find himself. Like he's going to play the piano, but he's not good at it. But that's okay. He's going to try to play baseball. He gets hit with a ball, career terminated, but that's okay. But then he's going to realize that he has weaknesses and strength. He's going to try science and he's going to be fabulous in science. So it's about a book about that it's okay to fail. Sometimes you have to fail.
Yes, it's a lesson learned. That's really amazing that you pivoted like that. It's a tough career to such a warm, embracing career that, who knows what will be next. I think that the message that you're sending to start it at such a young age is really great, because as adults, we grow up with all these stories about, I can't do this because, and it's been embedded in us for so many years that it takes that much longer to kind of get rid of that belief that no longer serves you. So doing this at such a young age is really incredible. I applaud you for that.
Thank you so much.
Tell us about where people can find the book, and you shared some exciting news about the book.
My book is available in Amazon, and it's also available in barnesandnoble.com. My book also got accepted in the Newark Public Library, where I just been nominated as an upcoming Latina author. March 23rd is going to be an event, which it's going to be called Mujeres de Ayer, Hoy y Siempre, which means women of yesterday, today, and forever. And I guess it's going to be an event on female Latina authors.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
You must be so proud of yourself.
I am. You know what? I think I don't want to stop giving,
It's in you to serve. I mean, even in your police work, and now as an ESL teacher to young impressionable minds, and to be writing these books that have such a great message and story and a learning opportunity, obviously. Before we wrap it up, I wanted to ask you 3 or 4 questions really quick. So the first one is, can you share, without giving too much away, because I know, police work and all that, can you share any story that would kind of like a Law and Order story?
I'm going to give you a Pretty Woman story.
Oh, love it. Go ahead.
Well, I was a vice detective, and I got approached by a John. I was posing as a prostitute. He offered me $1,000.
Wow.
One night. I didn't have to do anything. He just wanted to spend one night with me. I was like in shock. I was like, this guy has $1,000. He just wanted somebody to talk to, and he wanted to pay me $1,000. Long story short, he gets arrested because he kept on persisting and solicited me. It turns out he was the mailman that actually worked right across the street from the precinct that I worked in.
Oh,
yeah. He was a mailman, and and then in court, like he apologized. He was like, "I'm just a lonely bachelor. I saw you looking so pretty in the middle of the night. I didn't care. I would have paid $1,000 just to talk to you."
oh my goodness. Well, flattery. Well, for those who are listening, Elizabeth is a beautiful Latina woman, and I'm very proud to have her on the show. And she has so many accomplishments, but that's pretty amazing. That is, and yeah, the mailman, first of all, how much are they getting paid that he has $1,000 to throw out at,
Well, when we went to court, he lived with his mother, supposedly.
Oh.
He was a bachelor. He was never married. So, he was just looking for a good time, and he had $1,000 to spend. So I was like, I never, ever, especially in the hood in Newark, they're like, when I worked twice, it was like $20, $10. So I was really like, impressed, $1,000. So I like to tell my Pretty Woman story.
That's a great story. I love that story. And thank you for sharing that. My next question for you is, to me, it seems like, and I could be wrong, you have a huge amount of patience to do the work that you've done and now doing what you're doing. Is there any specific pet peeve that you have that your family knows, or coworkers would say, oh, don't do this because that's going to piss her off? What would that be?
I guess injustice. And I'm going to say that it's sad to say this, but, a lot of women, a lot of cattiness goes on.
Oh.
But that's everywhere. I can't say that it's any large organization, you're going to have your catty women. And that's so, I love to empower other women. I believe in women empowerment. So that doesn't fit good with me.
Yeah.
Catty woman, or a woman hating on another woman. So I think that, the injustice of, of doing something, another woman doing something to another woman, that really would piss me off.
Yeah, intentionally. Yeah. I think I can agree with that for sure. Okay. And the last question before we wrap up is, what is your ideal thing to do for just you to kind of decompress and focus just on you?
Well, I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual. And I'm a Reiki master. So
Oh, okay.
I like to practice ancient calming techniques. I practice yoga, meditation, qigong, which is like an ancient Chinese practice where
Yeah.
they through the meridians of your body. I like ancient healing. I like
That's
all
awesome.
natural healing, anything holistic. It's in my line,
That's great. That's really awesome. Well, I haven't done all of those, but I am somebody who I'm terrible at meditating, but I do try every single day. I do love yoga. I think that for women who are as busy as we are and who empower others and as strong as we are, it's important to take care of ourselves, because if we can't take care of ourselves first, we're no good to anybody else, our families, our loved ones, our friends. I like that you have all of those things in you to take care of you. So, Elizabeth, this has been absolutely awesome. I loved hearing your story today. I wish you all the best. We will make sure that for the listeners that we have all of the information regarding her book in the show notes. And when's the next book? When do you plan to have that out by?
My book should be out by maybe September. It's not going to be a very big book. It's going to be more elementary.
Okay.
And it's going to have Latino incorporation in the book, which is like a little spin-off from my Spanglish, because I'm going to use phrases like in the Latino terms of endearment that a Latino mom would use. It's going to be in the book. For example, you know how in the Latino culture, let's say we have somebody who is very argumentative, they're like, that's the lawyer. Esa va a ser el abogado. Somebody that's really smart, oh, that's the teacher. So, I'm going to incorporate that as a fun learning about the Latino culture of something a Latino mom does, just that term of endearment. I'm going to use those little phrases because this little kid is so smart. Like, he's obsessed with the universe. He's obsessed with Mars. So she's going to name him. Right now, the name, it was supposed to be Ricky Mars is the name of the book, but I have a son named Ricky, and he's like, Mom, people are going to think that book is about me, so I might change the name on it. Mars is that because he's so obsessed with Mars, that's what she's going to call him. So that's the name of the book, but I might change the name. But right now, it's supposed to be Ricky Mars.
Awesome. Well, again, Elizabeth, thank you so much for being on the show today. We will make sure that everybody has the information about your book. I wish you all the best with your second book and success with the first book. And for you and your family, all the best to you. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you again for listening. We'll be back soon with a brand new episode of the Hart Inspired podcast. Until then, I'm your host, Michelle Delgado. I welcome you to support the show by rating us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. To learn more about Hart Metrics Consulting, book a strategy call by visiting the website at hartmetrics.com.